I never thought that after 37 years of marriage, I'd find myself sitting across from my husband at the kitchen table, unable to meet his gaze. The clock on the wall seemed unbearably loud. The tea in my cup had grown cold hours ago. My fingers worried the edge of the napkin in my lap, pulling at loose threads as though unraveling them could somehow undo the past. "Margaret," Robert finally said, his voice quiet but steady. "You've been pacing all evening. Just tell me." The words stuck in my throat. How do you confess to the man who has loved you for nearly 4 decades that the very foundation of your life together was built on a lie? That one reckless, cowardly decision had poisoned everything since? I drew a shaky breath. "Robert, I've been keeping something from you for a very long time." His gray eyes, calm and unreadable like a winter sea, fixed on me. "How long?" I stared down at my hands. "Since our first year of marriage." The silence that followed wasn't simply silence. It felt like a blade suspended in the air between us. We met when we were both 24. Robert had always been the sort of man who made others feel safe just by standing near them. Dependable, hardworking, and with a dry humor that slipped out when least expected. I, on the other hand, was restless, ambitious, still carrying the sting of a broken engagement that had left me bitter and desperate to begin again. Robert had been my steady ground then. When he asked me to marry him, I didn't think twice. We wed quickly, and within a year I was pregnant, or at least I thought I knew who the father was. But I wasn't certain. And for 37 years I never spoke a word of it. "Is this about the children?" Robert asked now, his voice suddenly taut. "Margaret, what are you saying?" My heart shattered as the truth forced itself out. "It's about Daniel." Daniel. The one who shared Robert's love for tinkering with old radios, who hummed while he worked, who inherited that stubborn sense of fairness. The son Robert coached through baseball seasons, guided through science projects, and sat up with all night when chickenpox struck. Tears blurred my vision. "Robert, he may not be yours." For a moment, Robert's face was stone. Then his jaw tightened. "May not. I don't know for certain," I stammered. "Back then, I was seeing someone else. It ended before you and I married. But the timing. I couldn't be sure. And then Daniel was born, and you were so happy. I told myself it didn't matter. You loved him. You raised him." The chair scraped back sharply as Robert stood. He walked to the window, staring out into the darkened garden, his hands clasped tightly behind him. "All these years," he said at last, his voice low. "And you let me believe. I thought I was protecting you," I whispered. "No," he turned, and for the first time in years his voice rose, sharp and cutting. "You were protecting yourself." The days that followed were worse than anything I had feared. Robert didn't shout, didn't storm out. He simply withdrew. He moved into the guest room. Meals were eaten in silence. The distance between us widened into a canyon I couldn't bridge. Daniel noticed, of course. One evening he called, his voice worried. "Mom, is Dad sick? He doesn't sound like himself." The weight of guilt pressed so heavily on my chest I could barely breathe. Yet, a selfish part of me still hoped Robert might bury it, that the years we'd built would matter more than the fracture I had revealed. But Robert was not a man who turned away from the truth once it was uncovered. 2 weeks later, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a folded sheet, an order for a paternity test. My breath caught. You want to know?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I need to know. If I'm going to spend the rest of my life beside you, I can't do it under a lie." His eyes held no anger now, only a grim resolve. That hurt more than his fury. Test took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of walking on glass. Of replaying every moment of our marriage, every holiday photo, every whispered good night. 3 weeks of watching the man I loved withdraw into a version of himself I barely recognized. When the envelope came, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Robert did. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, my hands clasped tightly as he read the result. His shoulders stiffened. "Well," whispered. He turned his face. Unreadable. "He's mine." Relief crashed over me. Hot, dizzying, almost painful. I took a step forward. "Robert, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I was scared." He held up a hand. "Stop." froze. This isn't about Daniel anymore. It's about you. About us. For 37 years I trusted you. I built a life with you. And you? His voice cracked just slightly. You sat with that secret like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Cried. It ate at me every day. I hated myself for it. But you were such a good father, such a good man. I didn't want to destroy what we had. He shook his head. You destroyed it the moment you chose to keep it. The months that followed were the hardest of our lives. We went to counseling. We fought. We cried. There were nights I thought he would leave, and part of me almost wanted him to because the waiting, the half-love, the coldness was worse than any final goodbye. But Robert stayed. Not out of convenience or habit, but because after all the anger burned away, he still loved me. One rainy evening, almost 6 months after my confession, he came into the kitchen where I sat with my tea. He looked older, lines etched deeper around his eyes, but there was a softness there I hadn't seen in months. I've been thinking, he said, about forgiveness. I held my breath. It's not something you earn once and keep forever. Something you fight for every day. He sat across from me, just like the night this all began. I can't forget what you did, Margaret. But I also can't forget the life we've had. The good parts were real. The laughter, the kids. The quiet mornings, they were real. I reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. So where does that leave us? Asked. He gave a small, tired smile. It leaves us with a choice. To start again or to end it. And what do you want? He squeezed my hand, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of warmth. I want to try. It's been a year since that night. Our marriage isn't what it was, but in some ways it's more honest than ever. There are scars, yes. There's a grief that will never fully leave us. For the years we lost to a secret I should never have kept. But there is also a quiet, fragile hope. Robert once told me during one of those late-night counseling sessions that betrayal doesn't just break trust. It breaks the version of yourself that believed you'd never cause that kind of pain. He wasn't wrong. I am not the woman I was a year ago. Neither of us are. But when he holds my hand now, it's not out of habit. It's a choice. And that I've learned is far more powerful than any illusion of perfection I once tried to protect. Final reflection. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that set you free. I confessed because the guilt had become unbearable. But I never expected the storm that followed or the strange kind of peace that came after. Robert's reaction shocked me beyond words. Not because he forgave me easily, but because he chose to stay despite the hurt. Betrayal had cracked the foundation of our marriage, but it hadn't destroyed everything. What we have now isn't the same as what we once had. It's more fragile, more deliberate, and perhaps in its own broken way more real.